and then posted to our website. So if people are coming in late, they will have the opportunity to catch up at some point in time. So again, as Liz said, welcome. I'm Shannon Quinn-Kieran from Housing Innovations. I'm joined by Liz Isaacs, my colleague, and Miles Wensek is here, and Lauren Peretti is also here from Housing Innovations. We are also joined by Adam Yarnett from Nutmeg, who will give us all a demo of the renewal evaluation database later on. We're happy to see you all, have you all here. If you feel comfortable, put your cameras on. We love to see your faces. In general, I get to interact with you over email, so it's great to put faces to names. But I know we're not all always camera ready, so that's fine too. Whatever your comfort level is, that's fine. So a couple housekeeping things. Feel free to raise your hand if you have questions, or unmute yourselves. If you're on the phone, to unmute, press *6 and then *6 again. You could click the little microphone icon or on your picture if you're on Zoom. But also please mute yourselves when you're not speaking to eliminate any background noise. Also feel free to use the chat feature if you have questions, and we will try to address those as we go along. Again, the webinar is being recorded right now, and we're going to post it to our website as soon as we can, probably within the next 24 hours.
And we'll send an email out too, just reminding everybody that the recordings exist, the slides exist, and reminding you of all the upcoming deadlines.
Yes, thanks, Liz. So we're going to walk through our agenda, welcome and introductions. We're going to do a little bit of background on renewal evaluations, why we do this, walk through the renewal evaluation database a little bit. I will, and then again, Adam will do it later, a demonstration of the RED is what we're calling it. We're going to go through the renewal evaluation criteria for this year, the process and the schedule, questions, and then resources. So background. We at CT BOSS, we have, it's always in flux with consolidations and also the configuration of grants with several sub-recipients and everything. But we have over 100 projects funded by CT BOSS COC funds. We use data already input into HMIS and collected for the purposes of annual performance measures, annual performance reports, and system performance measures. So it's data you've already input. It's data that we use for, as we'll talk about later, for various reasons. So it's not extra work for people. And really the process has evolved over more than 10 years, taking into account changes in makeup of the COC, availability of data, and HUD guidance. For instance, some of the metrics we used before, but we no longer use because we know providers were consistently performing so well on them, such as, are your people on the by name list and items like that. Why do we evaluate renewal projects? I'm sorry. HUD asks us to review projects as part of the annual competition, the COC competition. So that's part of the reason that we do it. Performance data is used by HUD to evaluate system performance. You've been in contact with CCH that's currently working on the system performance measure report, and they've asked you to review your data. So performance data is used for that. That impacts the COC's application score. Performance data is used by CT BOSS to inform which projects should continue to be funded, and in an effort to continually improve our system performance and our individual project performance. It's a way for us to provide agencies feedback on projects and it provides the steering committee with information about system-wide needs. How are we performing on length of stays in programs? How are we performing on income? How are we performing on exits to permanent housing? So that we know if people need more guidance. Do we need more resources for income? Do we need more resources on housing stability so that people are able to stay in permanent housing for longer or exit to permanent housing, that type of thing. And then, as always, better system performance leads to more funds. We can get a higher score on that COC competition, which allows us to get new projects year after year. So there's a new name this year, Renewal. We were calling it GRE last year, and this year we changed it to Renewal Evaluation Database. It's the same exact database with some improvements this year, but we're calling it RED. And this is the second year we're using the Renewal Evaluation, and we're excited about the ease of use that it can provide you all, and the transparency that it can provide you all by seeing your data, how that the data that you enter into HMIS transfers into this score that you get for renewal evaluations. So you see all of your data in one place and see how your projects will be scored. It pulls data directly from HMIS, or for DV providers, you give us the CSV file, not to get too technical, but from your comparable database. And the RED also pulls data directly from SurveyMonkey and Zengen, which is our grants management database that we at Housing Innovations enter data into. So providers, again, have direct access to your scored HMIS data in real time, which we'll get to see a little bit later. You all can regularly check your renewal evaluation score, and you can see the scores change as updates are made in HMIS. Was there somebody who had a question? No? Okay. HMIS data and comparable database. Again, the majority of items, just like last year, scored are from HMIS or comparable database data. The reporting period is the same as the period that HUD asks for data from for system performance measures. So it's October 1st, 2021 to September 30th, 2022. It's a full year's worth of data. So any of the data cleanup that you all have been doing for system performance measures, and even for some of you who've been doing reviewing your data for PIT, how we ask you all to do that. This is all going to be helpful in getting your score for renewal evaluations as accurate as possible. So for instance, double checking your move-in dates for rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housings, that's going to be helpful in getting this data as accurate as possible so that your score is accurate and fair. Providers you can view your reports in the renewal evaluation database, and if the data is correct in the RED or incorrect in the renewal evaluation database, it must be corrected in HMIS or the comparable database. You cannot correct it in RED. It's pulled directly from there, so it must be corrected in HMIS. The renewal evaluation criteria has been voted on by the steering committee. It's posted to the website, and there are links right here. And I think Liz is going to put them in the chat box also if you didn't already. Yeah. So if you're wondering what you're being evaluated on, everything is spelled out on these documents. What's new? Again, most of what is being evaluated this year is exactly the same as last year. There are a couple of small tweaks. We're going to talk about what those are in these slides. So for the metric where we measure people who remain in or exit to permanent housing, for transitional housing, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing, there are a few exclusions from the scoring for that measure. Participants who are deceased won't count against you. Programs with only one exit with a negative outcome that will be disregarded for that measure. Exits from housing to seek safety is also disregarded, and new for this year, exits to foster care, group homes, those kinds of temporary settings, long-term care, nursing homes, substance abuse treatment are going to be disregarded, but will not count against you for that measure.
Shannon, there's a question in the chat from Diane Albini. It says, is there a report in HMIS for move-in? Is there a report in HMIS for move-in dates? I don't think we know the answer to that. Adam from Nutmeg is on the webinar with us this morning. I'm not sure, Adam, if you know the answer to that, and if not, we will ask CCH and let you know.
I do not know off the top of my head, but I will ask Tashika now. She probably knows because she seems to know everything. And I will let you know as soon as I get that answer back.
Thanks,
So I'm not aware of a report either on that, but I do know in the PIT database, when you are checking to see who's showing up in your program, if you haven't put in a move-in date for the people in permanent housing, rapid or PSH, they're not going to show up. There's a button there that you can click who's showing up, and it gives you the ID, the HMIS ID of the people. So if you haven't done a move-in date, they're not going to show up in your PIT, and you can test that once the HIC is submitted. So you should be able to test it now for your projects. But Adam will see if we can get more information on that. So also,
Shannon, I'm sorry, there are a couple more questions in the chat. So Amanda asked if the slides will be shared. Yes, the slides will be posted to the CT Boss website, and I think Liz is working on also getting them.
Yes,
up.
we will get them in. Yep.
Up to the chat. Can you put them in the chat, Liz?
Yes, Shannon or I will.
Okay.
I'm having some technical difficulties. But
Oh,
yes.
okay. I could try. And then Amanda says the rapid rehousing outlier report will show missing move-in dates. So that's just for anybody that has a rapid rehousing program in response to the earlier question. And then Lisa says you can run the sub detail report, then refer to that column. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank
I think
you.
this is also in reference to the move-in question, move-in date question. And then someone also suggests use the APR report and filter for missing move-in dates. So good use of crowdsourcing to answer your questions. Thank you, everyone.
We appreciate that. Also new this year, there is no agency provider form. That used to be a requirement, and I think points would be deduced if it wasn't submitted on time, but that is not a requirement this year. Also in the past, consumer surveys were due with a final submission. This year they are due with the initial, consumer surveys are due with the initial submission. So that is due, those are due December 16th. And there will be a date slide later on. Grant review assessment. So the next few slides are going to cover what the renewal evaluation, they're just screenshots really. If you're going through the steps and you want to go use the slides as a tool, there's a few screenshots coming up. But again, Adam's going to do a live demonstration of the database, but there'll be a few screenshots to show you what you need to do initially for that initial data review. There is a lateness penalty for not completing timely initial submission by December 16th of your data, or uploading your CSV if you're if you're a DV provider.
Shannon, I'm just going to interrupt real quick because folks are asking, can consumer surveys be done in paper form? Yes, they can be. And in the email that's been going out, and we'll send it again, it describes different ways you can submit consumer surveys, both paper and electronic. But Amanda, reach out to me if you have any confusion.
Thank you. So this is the first screen that you'll all come to in the renewal evaluation database in red. You'll see the projects available to you, and you see right here in the pink box, action is still needed. So you haven't completed your grant assessment review yet. You need to click on that black box to actually review your data. And once you click that black box, this is the top of the screen that you'll see. The next slide is the bottom of the screen that you'll see. So you'll see your project name, update score based on current HMIS data. So click on that. So you see the most current data available. And then the next screen is all of your data, everything that's been pulled in from Zengen. You see the spending is the first line that's pulled in from Zengen. You see the consumer surveys that's pulled in from SurveyMonkey, and then the rest, except for the penalties, is pulled in from HMIS. So this all reflects your data in real time.
I just want to note that if you're a YCP grant and your surveys are submitted in, what was it? I forgot the name of the survey. I forgot. It's not Survey
Survey
Monkey.
Gizmo, I think.
Yeah, that. They're going to be entered in Zengen and they'll be pulled through Zengen. So,
To be clear, our team is going to do that. So there's nothing that you need to do. Our team is handling that. I wanted to refer to the chat box. We've got a couple more questions in the chat box. So Sylvia asked, can we get the links live for next year as soon as we close the year? I think she's referring to the consumer survey links there. That way we can do the surveys throughout the year. Sylvia, we'll take a look at that in the process. That would be a change in how but we'll look at that if that would be helpful. We can look at that as a process improvement for next year.
To get it as soon as possible, but we are going to have some changes to the consumer survey for next year.
That's a good point. So thank you, Liz, for reminding me about that. So part of when we'll be able to release the consumer surveys for next year will be in part dictated by our fantastic consultants from CLIP are working on revising that survey instrument. So we won't be able to release new links until those revisions are complete and approved. So and I don't think we yet have a timeline for CLIP on that process. So thank you, Liz, for that reminder. And thank you, Sylvia, for that question. But we can think about that for the following year. If it doesn't work with the CLIP revisions for this year, we can think about that for the following year. How soon can we get the links out to everyone?
And as usual, Amanda read my mind, which was, yes, DEMIS surveys can be done instead of BOSS, and that can be done for a longer period of time. For last year.
But they're still all due.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But they're still all due on the 16th.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah, they're still all due on the same date.
Yep. And then Kathleen, great question, because this came up last year. No, there will not be automatic. I'm sorry. The question is, will the DEMIS surveys be automatically, I like the Jetsons. I like your thinking that somehow we can all talk to each other, which would be ideal and a best practice. But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. So the DEMIS surveys have to be submitted through our system.
Any other
questions? And so that means, yes, you need to upload them. So I know this came up last year where there was at least one provider with confusion with that. So again, so we don't go into so much detail here, there are really detailed steps in the email that we send out kind of as a reminder on exactly how to handle whether it's a DEMIS survey or a BOSS survey. And then if anyone has follow-up questions, please reach out to us and we're happy to clarify.
Any other questions?
No, we will not. Sorry, there's a question from Sylvia also. No, the two processes are separate, right? So you have to do whatever DEMIS requires you to do, right, for their surveys, right? And then it's pretty simple on our end, right? I mean, you can enter them yourselves in the SurveyMonkey links if you want, or I think what most people do is they upload surveys, scan them, upload them into Zenja, and our team handles the data entry. So the only thing you have to do is upload the DEMIS surveys to Zengen and anything that DEMIS requires you to do with those surveys.
All right.
Wait a second. But BOSS, I mean, DEMIS has allowed us to use the BOSS surveys in place of theirs. So last year.
That I don't know the answer to. That's a question for the folks at Demas, whether or not they will allow you to use the boss surveys. I don't know the
Well-
answer to that question.
Last year I had to get Miles to send something over there to them. Remember? Miles, maybe not. I ask you so much.
Well, yeah, because I think in your case and maybe some other people's cases, the Demas surveys were entered in the other database, and you don't have them in paper, I guess, right? So you had to have them send us copies or their reports so we had to actually enter it into the database, which was SurveyMonkey. Yeah, so in your case, yeah, I did forget about that because I think you're the only one that actually had that, or maybe someone else did.
Let's handle this question offline, Sylvia, because I feel like
Okay.
it's probably unique to your program, so we
Okay,
don't confuse everyone else.
all right.
All right, some common pitfalls with HMIS data that we have run into fairly commonly. So if we wanted to flag them for you, just to try to avoid any issues for this year. Incomplete data, so missing annual assessments. This is an assessment required for participants in programs who've been there for 1 year or more. An annual assessment is due on or around the anniversary of program entry, and it's fairly common like that we see this on SPMs as an error, or on renewal evaluations as an error, that these are not completed for people in a timely manner. So look and make sure those are complete for your people. Incorrect number of program participants. Some people have missed, and maybe it's that move-in date issue that they've been entered, but they don't have a move-in date, or they just haven't been entered or exited in a timely fashion. So if you have a sense of how many people are in your project, including family members, and then and also what the makeup of your project is, like income levels, that's going to help you just be able to look at your data, look at the scores and say, yes, that looks accurate, or no, that looks funky, and I need to go back and look at my HMIS data and fix that. So we highly recommend, if you haven't already, starting the data review process now. Starting it late and then having all these issues come up is just going to make things more challenging later on. So if you're able to start that now, that would be excellent. Another common pitfall with the renewal evaluation database is not clicking this blue box, update your score. So you've seen some kind of error or a mistake and gone ahead and fixed your HMIS data. You come back here and you look and you say it's still the same, it's not working, but you haven't clicked on that update score based on current HMIS data. So just remember, if you make fixes in HMIS, click this so you're getting the most up-to-date information that's in HMIS when you're reviewing your score. Performance, I'm going to hand off to Liz.
Yeah, and I'm just going to pause for a minute because I know we have veteran folks who've been around for many years, which is great. But I know we have some new faces here who may be scratching your head, which I know I was when I first learned about this system a year or two ago. So let me just pause. There really are no silly questions. It's not intuitive if you haven't done it before. So I just wanted to pause for 1 minute or 10 seconds if we don't have anybody. But any questions? Does that hopefully make sense what we've gone through? And again, we'll keep saying it, but this is not your last time to ask questions. So before you get confused, frustrated, angry, a host of emotions you don't want to have, just pick up the phone, shoot us an email. And again, there really are no dumb questions. I like to say that because then it makes me feel better, because I'm the queen of simple questions when it comes to technology, and I'm learning something new. So please reach out and let us know. All right, so we're going to talk about the criteria and we did put those in the chat box. And this is the performance piece. Next slide. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to close my chat. I can't see. So as folks know, we always look at spending every year. We're doing that again this year. And what I should say is we have very few changes, and the changes we have came from suggestions that you all have made and tweaks here and there. But overall, this is going to look very familiar to those of you who have seen these criteria in the past. So if you have over $2 million, you need to spend at least 95% of it and have 75,000 unspent. If it's under 100,000, it's 90%. And all projects must spend at least 95% and leave 50 unspent. And as Shannon mentioned, one of the sources is Sage. So this is the spending data is pulled from Sage for this. And a little more information on the next slide. So this gives the time periods, and this is important. So projects are evaluated on the most recent complete grant operating year. So this comes up every year because folks often, which makes sense because there are all kinds of dates to look at, aren't looking at the same dates we're looking at. So we have some examples here. So if your project ended at the end of October, you would submit your APR at the end of January, and then the spending that's looked at is for when the operating year ended, which was at the end of October. So I'm not going to do the next one, but the last bullet's important, which is if you would like to have your more recent spending data reflected in your renewal evaluation, then you can, but we need to know. So for example, your project ends the end of November and you wouldn't have your APR submitted. It wouldn't have to be submitted till the end of January. We can look at the period from December 1st to the end of November. And that's what's evaluated. Lauren or Miles, I apologize. Does someone need to give us a heads up on that? What's our mechanism for people?
No, it'll be, the data will be in Sage. But
They'll be there, right? Okay, so they already would have entered it.
He'll know
That'll
that
trigger
they've done it because it'll be, yeah, when he does the data entry, it'll be.
Perfect. I'm sorry. So you don't need to give us a heads up. We know because you've already put it in Sage. Thank you for that.
It's not, they put it in Sage, it's more or less.
I mean, it shows up there.
Yeah.
The magic happens, Miles. You know, I don't always know where that, but it happens.
Yeah. I mean, Sage is a little quirky lately where, but it's not something you worry about.
No.
It's been a little bit of a delay in Sage, so.
That's all right. We're not going to give anybody anything else to worry about. We'll let Miles is going to worry about Sage and we're going to worry about occupancy. And so
there's a question in the chat
okay.
box about the measure of spending. So Paul says, given the great difficulty hiring staff, many projects might have difficulty meeting the spending standards. Has it been discussed as an issue this year when we were voting on standards? So I think that was done in the summer, right? Correct. So I don't know that was discussed at the steering committee.
Yeah, and just to keep in mind, right, that when there's something that everyone struggles with, right, then everyone struggles with it, and then it's like it's like a bell curve, right? Like if everyone's struggling with it, then maybe then because ultimately what we use this for is ranking, and so you're ranked relative to how everyone else does. So we can certainly look at it. The window of opportunity has closed now for making adjustments to standards for this year. We can certainly look at it if it looks like the steering committee is so inclined next year to make adjustments. But I will say, spending all of our money is a very high priority. So any kind of significant lowering of the spending benchmark seems unlikely.
And there's another question about that, what we were talking about, to look at the most recently submitted APR. When would it have to be in Sage for the newest year to be counted? And Margaret is saying they have an APR due the end of this 12/28. When would it have to be in by?
If you go back to that slide, it'll have the details on that slide where we went through. So whatever data are in Sage as of 1/31/23 are going to be the data that we use.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Occupancy. So every year we look at occupancy. So it's 90%, and then that's based on a quarterly utilization, just like we've done in the past. And for YHDP crisis And youth PSH, it's up to 1 empty bed per quarter. Okay. So we also look at housing stability every year. We think it's important, HUD thinks it's important. So what we look at is our 95% of folks remaining in PSH or exiting to permanent housing. Same thing, 95% leavers to permanent housing out of rapid rehousing and transitional housing. 85% for youth rapid rehousing and diversion. YHDP crisis transitional housing, 60%. And for youth rapid rehousing, diversion, crisis TH, less than 5% exits to sheltered, unknown, or unsheltered. Non-cash benefits, we look at participants with non-cash benefits and we exclude health insurance at 95%. And then for DV programs, 76%. And this is not scored for YHDP. For length of stay, we look at for DV-TH programs, that length of stay is 2 years or less. For youth TH, COC non-DV programs, length of stay is 1 year or less. YHDP crisis TH housing, length of stay is 60 days or less. We also look at earned income again, just like last year. It's scored for all youth projects except YHDP diversion rapid exits. And we look for 20% increased earned income from entry to exit or follow-up. All right, we've talked a lot about consumer surveys, but we're going to talk a little bit more. And so Shannon mentioned this, really, really important. Every year this comes up and it's like heartbreaking. Someone's like, I missed the deadline and you did all the hard work to get it. I'll do my best to send out many, many reminders. But please remember that they're due on the 16th. And I know folks have been working on them for many months. So please, please remember when they are due. So maximum points are available with a, sorry, I'm gonna have a barking dog for a second. With a 35% response rate. So for example, if you have 100 people in the program and you have 40 surveys, you have a 40% response rate. If you do not submit surveys, you get a 0 on response rates. And there is a 5-point penalty if the surveys are late or not received at all. But what we do every year is if it's like you've forgotten you missed the 16th deadline of December, but you still want to see your surveys and we do like to get them, still send them in, but we just cannot take any after the 4th of January. We just can't consider any. But again, don't focus on that deadline. That's not important. The deadline that's really important is December 16th. And more on lateness and penalties. So Shannon talked about this earlier. There is a deadline. There are points deducted for not doing that grant assessment that Shannon showed you the screenshots for. There's a 2 points deducted for not updating and confirming Zengen contacts. And we're going to talk about Zengen in a couple slides. And this year, there will not be penalty waivers. So during COVID, people had certain circumstances. We waived, actually, I'm sorry, we did a penalty waiver overall. We are not anticipating doing that this year. That won't happen this year. So we don't like lateness penalties. I don't even like to do the slides. It feels negative. So let's not impose any. Everybody just meet those deadlines, please. Okay, so we're going to keep talking about process and schedule. And here's Zengen, and I'll let Shannon jump in if I start making things up here because she knows this better than I do. But what's really important is we use Zengen to make sure that we can find you. We have a lot of information to share with you. It's how you share information with us. And so it's really important that we have all the right people in there who should be in there. And you guys know better than I do. There's staff turnover, people leave. So please, please stay on top of this. Put this on your checklist when you have a new hire, that this is something that you need to incorporate. We have trainings on how to do it. You can click there. And Shannon is, as you all know, lovely and helpful and will answer your questions about Zengen. But please, please make sure you're up to date because it gets really confusing for you and for us if you don't.
I just want to highlight that you might be thinking to yourself, nothing has changed in my agency. Contacts are all the same, so I'm all good. And I'm here to say, no, you're not all good. There is a field in Zengen that we added that says this input here the date that you have reviewed and or changed your data. So that's the field that we're looking at to see if the data is updated. And if that's not recent, then the points will be deduced. So it's very important to at least go in there, have eyes on it, change that date.
That's really important. So I was focused on changing, what has changed, but you do have to do that. Even if, like Shannon said, everyone stayed, no changes, you still need to go in. So thank you, Shannon. Yes, I was focused on.
What do you mean recent? Amanda's asking the question, what do you mean recent? So if it's been updated I just sent out an email in November saying update your information in November. So November is what we mean by recent. Well, Lauren's saying something. Lauren, you're muted.
Sorry, I think the standard for renewal evaluation is that it's updated in the last quarter, right?
Okay.
So you have to have updated it in the last quarter.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, so here's our schedule. We're looking backwards a little bit. You may remember we let folks start surveys in August. It's the 30th today, which seems hard to imagine. So we're doing our launch today, and then the red is going to open today, which is really exciting. Looking ahead, I've only said it 7 times now, but on December 16th, an important date, your consumer surveys are due, and then your initial submissions are due. So when we say initial data submissions, we're talking about completing the grant assessment, reviewing and refreshing the data. What we're not saying is that you're all done by then, but what we're saying is we know you're in the system, we're all on the same page, and you're good to go processing, moving ahead. But it's really important. Last year, we had some folks for lots of different reasons, but that just were not getting in the system. And we need to know that everybody is on board. We're all on the same page, because we can't help people who aren't even in the system.
And there are slides that Shannon did earlier that show like exactly what we mean when we say you've completed the grant assessment. There's screenshots in the earlier slides that Shannon went through that shows you what you need to do by 12/16 to not get a lateness penalty because you've not logged into the system and done that grant assessment.
Exactly. Perfect. And also, as Lauren's saying that, so let's not wait till the 16th to log in and do all of that. We keep saying, early and often, like voting. Okay.
There's a question from Amanda in the chat, Liz. If we are submitting, I think DEMIS surveys, what is the time frame in which those had to be completed? I think that those details are in the email that you sent out.
I was just going to say, I don't want to say it off the top of my head because I'll get it wrong, but the details are in the email that went out.
Let me see if I can look it up in the email.
You look it up and I'll keep going, and we'll do that. And then this will be my plug also. If you're saying, what emails is she talking about? Please make sure that you go to the CT Boss website. So Google CT Boss, and on the very first page, you can sign up for emails. So if you keep saying she's talking of these emails, I have no idea what she's saying. Please sign up. We do talk. We don't mean to inundate everybody this time of year. We do send a lot of emails, but please sign up because it's how we communicate with folks and how we know who needs to get an email. And if you get your contact information in Zengen, this is magic, it talks to Constant Contact. So then you'll also be on the email list. So another plug for Zengen. By the 6th of January, providers need to get their support requests in. And by the 20th, it's your deadline to make data changes. And then remember, refreshing your data in red. And then we are going to let you know when the reports will be due, when grievances can be submitted. I'm going to pause there for a second because I see, are there other chat questions on?
Liz, I am not seeing that particular detail in the email. I may just be missing it. So I think we'll get that response to Amanda's question out by email when we do the follow-up email from this webinar. So thanks, Amanda, for that question.
Thanks, Amanda. And I'm sorry that was not there. That's a good question, because that's.
Or I just didn't find it.
No, either way, we'll get an answer out. Shannon, anything else in chat before we move ahead?
Florian says the grant renewal says our grant operating year to confirm is 6/1/21 to 5/31/22, which is last year.
I think Florian, why don't you reach out to Miles outside of this webinar, and we'll get your question for your individual project answered that way, because I'm not sure I'm following. I think it's better to just talk about that one-on-one with Miles.
Thank you.
Great. So this is really important. And I know we bombarded you asking you this, and people have been really good about getting back to us and giving us all kinds of good information. But we want to make sure that we're evaluating the right projects. We want to make sure you know which projects are being evaluated. So you can click on the link. It's in the last email we just sent. The date was last week to review this. If you have not done it, please do it today, because there's nothing more frustrating than you not knowing what's being evaluating, or us, confusing a consolidation or a merged project that we didn't get right. So please do that. And so if your project has multiple HMIS IDs, please check those, because nothing's ever straightforward. Sometimes it's straightforward, but it's often confusing with multiple IDs. So we just talked about support requests, and what that process looks like is that if you have a question, you're going to submit a support request in red. It's not, if you submit it through email, that's not a good idea. That's not our process, and we'll get lost. And so we have a really good system in red. Folks much smarter than me, with great, technological savviness, have figured this out. It's really straightforward. So please check it out in red. And these requests are going to either alert housing innovations or Nutmeg, depending on what the issue is. And when you're looking for HMIS cleanup, you're going to use the COC renewal evaluation data cleanup link on the support page in red. So again, it's pretty straightforward. Go to the support page, and that is really pretty intuitive. And hopefully you can get your questions answered.
And I think Adam can probably show people that
Yes.
when he does the demo.
Yep. Great. And so if it is a DV question, or a part of the DV comparable database, you're going to contact Joanne at this email.
Yeah, if the question is specifically related to the DV comparable
Right.
database, then contact Joanne. If you're a DV project and you have a question about a standard or something else in the process,
Yes.
contact us. But for
Yes.
questions specific to the comparable database, we're not going to know the answer to those things. So you should contact the experts at CCADV on that.
Absolutely. So just like in the past, folks are going to have the ability to grieve. Once your reports are final, you're going to submit a grievance actually through RED, like last year. The grievance committee meets, we make the results available. And then we just like to highlight this, that what you cannot grieve is standards that have already been established. So I'm going to make a number up, say the standard is 50%, and you put a grievance in and say, that's just too high. We can never meet 50%. We think it should be 40%. And you may be totally reasonable in your argument. It's just not something we can take at that time. That's just, as like Lauren mentioned, we have a specific time we need to talk about, set those standards, and it's not during the grievance process. And then any data issues that weren't corrected. So we really encourage people to use the support.
I opened something that had a virus.
To use the process to ask questions and get the support you need. Because what we can't do again is for you to say like, well, that's strange. In HMIS, it says 6, but in RED, it says 5. We need all those issues fleshed out ahead of time. So just want to let you know that those are not grievable things.
And then I just wanted to give people a sense, we did not, when Liz went through the timeline slides, we said that it was going to be TBD, right, when the final reports are available and when the grievance process is going to open. But just to give you guys a sense, the RED is still fairly new, right? We think everything is working properly and things are going to go super smoothly this year. If if all that pans out, right, and we don't have any unforeseen issues, then I think we anticipate those reports being ready once all of the spending data is available in Sage, and so that those reports would be ready in February probably, and that the grievance window would then open in February. But we'll announce it and send out plenty of reminders and whatnot well in advance. But that's our current thinking on the timeline here.
Yep. Thanks, Lauren.
Just a note on spending, is if you're in a timeline that your APR is not due or it's not going to be completed until like January, December, or whatever, when you run your report right now, it's going to pull up last year's information. So that's, once your information is available, that's your score is going to change accordingly to your new spending data. So just it only affects projects that are in flux with their spending right now, if they're going to get updated data by time February rolls around. So I just wanted to mention that because the system automatically looks for data of the current year. If it has blank, it goes to the prior year. Yeah, so it's looking for data to score. So that's automatic, and that's how the system's built, and that's fine. For those that are into that period, it's gonna, your score is not gonna be final until February then.
Great. All right. Excellent. Well, we're gonna let Adam do his thing for us.
There is a question regarding DB in there that you probably want to address first before we lose track of it.
I said something to Florian. I asked Florian to contact Nutmeg because I believe that there's a way to enter anonymously in HMIS, but I asked her to contact Nutmeg for more information on how to do that.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks, Adam. All right.
So do I stop share?
Shannon, I did. She is entered anonymous, but there's no information because everything goes in as no data. So how does that reflect with APR and HMIS? And
Did you talk to Nutmeg already about that?
yeah, Jim is working with me with that in particular, and we've entered it, but everything is no data because nothing can be entered that has vital information.
I feel like there has to be a different way to get the data.
Oh, Florian, just a quick note. Could you run your report for Jim? I didn't want to start anything in RED, so Jim was asking for that, and I sent them last year's per his request, but I can't give him this year's because.
Okay, let's deal with that offline, and maybe Florian, I'll be in touch with you by email. I feel like there has to be a different.
Yeah, actually, the process for HMIS specific questions, right? There's a link in the RED, right, where people should be submitting HMIS specific questions. So Florian, if you've not already submitted a help desk ticket to HMIS, I would go into the RED and use that link for submitting HMIS specific questions, because our team is not going to be able, like our team is not doing the support on that. Those support requests go to Nutmeg. Okay.
Yeah, in her case, she's working with Jim. Yeah, that's not
yeah. All right, let's keep going.
Yeah, we're gonna let Adam do his thing.
All right, let me share my screen here and we'll try to go through this. You did a pretty good job. I didn't realize you had the screenshots in your presentation already. So you've already covered a big part of it there. Let me know if the screen is not shared as it should be.
You're good.
All right. And if there's any questions in chat, because that's automatically hidden on my screen here, then if somebody can just yell at me and bring that to my attention.
We will shout them out. And I just, before we get started, our last comment on DV is that Jasmine Pierce at CCADV also said that she's happy to help folks, and her email is in the chat box. So thank you, Jasmine, too. That's great to get her perspective and expertise on that. Very good. Okay, thanks.
All right, well, so the basic overview was pretty well and thoroughly covered there. So I'll kind of step you all through the process, how you'll actually get in here. The first step, obviously, you have to log into the system. And this is where it gets important that your contacts are updated in Zengen, because your logins email is based on those Zengen contacts. So if you are not in Zengen, then you are not in here. If you have logged in previously, you should already have a password for the system. And if you don't, there's a link under the login button that if it's you forgot your password, or if it's your first time logging in and you need to set a password, use that link for the password reset, and that should get you all set. If you do not get a password reset email, then that is likely because you are not one of the contacts in Zengen, and we would have to get that taken care of. There is a support link on the page for help with login issues. I will get to the support page afterwards, but we can get you set up with that. So the first step there is going to be, actually that's not even the user I wanted to log in as. The first step there is going to be to log into the system. I'm going to use this one here. All right. Now, once you get into the system, you have a link on here that says My Projects. This is going to show you all the projects that are associated with you via those Zengen contacts. For the purpose of this demo, we're just using some test projects in here. You'll see the little calendar on the right here showing the HMIS data reporting period, the initial submissions deadline, all the dates that were already talked about and are in the emails you've already gotten, but they're also on here as a reminder. The grievance filing deadline will be set once, as Lauren mentioned, once we get to that point. So you'll see all the projects that you should have access to. If you have an issue where you either see a project you don't think you should, or more likely are not seeing a project that you should, there is an item for that on the support page also, which could indicate that the contacts in Zengen again are possibly not up to date, because that is where all this comes from. So I'm going to go into one of the test projects on here. There's a little view button next to each one that will bring you into the details of it. These have already been scored during testing, but I will also backtrack a little bit shortly and show you the initial process there. You click on the view button and you see all the details of your project. We'll show you the date up on the top right here that the data was last refreshed in HMIS. As it was discussed before, you can refresh that data periodically. So if you get a bad score, the numbers don't look right, something's not updated, you haven't gotten your move-in dates or some other thing, you can hit the button here to refresh the HMIS data after you've cleaned it up. All the scores will refresh, this data will refresh, and that'll just be a handy way to see what when the data you're looking at was last collected. You'll see the basic scorecard on top here showing how many points were available, how many the project was awarded, any penalties, and then your overall score. And then below that, you see the scores for each individual criteria. So some of the ones they were talking about with the spending, occupancy, all that information. So it'll list any details of what the benchmark standard is for the scoring tiers. For example, for the spending here, it met the first benchmark criteria, tier 1, so it got the full amount of points. For the participants remaining in PSH or exiting to PSH, missed the mark for the first scoring tier, but got the second tier, so 20 points available, 10 points awarded. You see the actual performance measures and such in here. I believe 95% is the tier 1 rating for this one, so just missed it. And basically the breakdown of all the scoring items. Some of the items on here list not scored. That's because some of the criteria are not currently assigned points, but they're still calculated on here. Still see those. You get your totals at the bottom, any penalties that were assigned, and the final score. And there's also a tab here for HMIS program details. If this is an HMIS program or multiple HMIS programs collectively within the grant, those will show on here. And I'll try and bring one of them up for a non-test project in a moment. So when it was discussed in the slides earlier to make sure that the HMIS programs were correct for your grant project, that's where you'll be able to see them. And then we get some of the other details that kind of go into your scoring, what kind of project type it is, the number of units from the PIT data, whether it's a youth or DV project, and then some of the household and person counts, spending information, etc. And that is basically the summary of the score itself. Did we have any questions on there so far?
Adam, you may have said this, but I just wanted to call out to people also, if you have questions about what the criteria are, Adam has helpfully linked those criteria right here, so you don't have to dig if you're a youth project or all of our other projects. Both sets of criteria are linked right there.
Yeah, I thank you for pointing that out. I have it on my notes to mention, and I skipped right over it, so I'm glad somebody's paying attention. Yes, all those scoring criteria are here. You'll be able to just bring one of them up.
Adam,
that has
did
the
you
full
show them
details.
last year's? Yep. Did you show them where they could see last year's stuff also from
I
here?
did not, because
That's
I
new this
don't
week.
have last year's scores on these test projects.
Okay, yep.
But I will show
But
that.
you can just show
on-
them the budget, the button. Yeah.
The button she's referring to is there is a button up here where if you had your project evaluated last year, you'll be able to see this page with your scores from last year as well, which I don't have in here for the test programs that we're using for this demo. But your actual programs will be able to show you your previous year's score if you had it. There is on this page. It was mentioned that non-HMIS systems that use an HMIS comparable database can use that CSV file. Those are those HUD CSV APR exports. So if you have a project that is not using HMIS, then this box will show up where you can select one of those reports generated by your system and upload it into here. If your project is an HMIS project, that box won't be there, and it'll just be the button to update the score based on live HMIS data. DV projects, by my understanding, will be using the CSV because they're many of them are not currently in HMIS. I believe that is changing, but I don't think that has changed yet. We do have a reminder across the top here about the submission deadline. In addition to being on the other page, we try and call attention to that everywhere so that nobody forgets when the data is due by. And that is basically it for the scoring page here. There is the option that Housing Innovations may enter an adjustment for points for certain one-off situations. If that were to happen, there will be a note explaining why and what the point adjustment was next to any of these scoring criteria that were adjusted. If you have any particular examples that you want to throw in, Lauren, anybody about what such a reason might be for that, then go right ahead.
Yeah, so that's going to be like really like super clear cut things, right? Like the the building had a fire and half of the units were unavailable for occupancy during the evaluation period. We would consult with the COC leadership. Any requests that we get like that seem really super clear cut to us, we will consult with the COC leadership. The COC leadership will make the decision, and then if they agree that you should not be scored on occupancy, which if your units were physically not available, which I can't imagine they would not, then we would make an adjustment to remove the occupancy from the set here, so you would not be scored on occupancy.
Right, thanks for that example. I'm going to go back to the project list here. Once some of your projects have been scored, you'll see that they're listed as scored. You'll see the scores. If you have entered any grievances for them, those will show up here. I'll show you how that process works also. But first, I'm going to backtrack briefly to show you the process of the first time verification of your data there. So for that, I'm going to come into a bigger list of all the projects here, and I'm just sort of randomly picking one of the HMIS projects here to show. So you'll see this screen indicating that the grant assessment review needs to be completed before you can get or see any of your scores. That was indicated in the slides before as well. You click on that, and you have to confirm your program's operating year as the system understands it to be, and let us know if they are or are not accurate. And also, this is a chance to confirm the HMIS programs associated with the grant. So if there's multiple HMIS programs, they will all show here, and then you can identify if it is or is not accurate, so that if either of these are not accurate, they can be flagged for review. And then hitting the button will submit and get the initial scores. And that's what we saw on the previous page with the test project. I'm going to go back to the list here and show that grievance process as well. Here we go. This one's got some. Once your scores have been assigned, you won't be able to do this till after the grievance process starts. But when you do get there, you will be able to enter a grievance for any item that you feel that you were scored incorrectly on. Let me see if I can get that set here so I can log in with something that can see the grievances before the grievance period actually starts. Let's scroll back down here again. There. This button will show up for you only after the grievance process starts. And that button is going to show you every criteria that you were scored on, what the score was, and allow you to enter a hopefully more comprehensive reason for the grievance, obviously for testing purposes. We kind of did quick and dirty there. Detail the reason that you think that you should be scored differently on this particular item. Leave blank any that you don't have an issue with. Hit the submit grievances button, and then those will get flagged for Housing Innovations to review. That will kind of mark this in red so that you can identify those as a grievance. It shows you how many items that you had filed one for, and those will show up in red next to each criteria. The grievance process, as I understand it, is that there is an independent grievance committee that will review these and make their decisions as to whether an item would be not scored or adjusted accordingly. And the results of that will end up being detailed here, and your score will either be, like it says here, score changed and that you're given full points for it, or it will mark the criteria as not scored, so it doesn't count for or against you, and just ends up being ignored completely. And then your score will have the updated score as a result of that. So that process again won't be available until after all of the final points have been assigned, which would be sometime, I believe you had said was going to be January or February, Lauren, but that will show up on the calendar on top.
We think February.
February.
Yeah, we think February. We hope February. Fingers crossed, February.
All right. So initially, all of your projects will show as awaiting submission because they hadn't been reviewed or entered yet. And once you have entered that information, you'll get your scores, your grievances, and that I think pretty much sums up the grievance process, which is also pretty straightforward.
So also just real quick, new this year, Adam also added another wonderful feature for us, which is that last year you could see after the grievance committee met, you could see whether or not your scores were adjusted, but you couldn't see any information about why the grievance committee made that decision. This year, you'll be able to see both your score adjustment as well as some feedback from the grievance committee, about why your score either was or was not adjusted. So as soon as the grievance committee meets and our team does the data entry, that information will be available immediately in the RED, and you won't have to wait for us to get letters out via the archaic process of a Microsoft Word letter that we have been doing up until now. So we appreciate Adam's work on that. Help modernize our processes.
All right, yes, thanks for that clarification there also. Yep, that will all be available to view and hear as soon as that has met. Lauren, is there a process by which a notification goes out that the grievance committee has met, returned their, okay. All right, so then you'll all be notified once the grievances have been reviewed and you'll be able to see the results in here right away. So the support page that was mentioned previously has some handy links to both the recorded webinar. This is currently last year's. This current webinar will be up, I believe the plan is within 24 hours. The slides, also this is last year's slides. They'll be updated to this year's slides later today or tomorrow. And a basic how-to guide as well that covers basic everything we've discussed today. The common questions and issues list will be updated as time goes on if there are questions or issues that people have that come up frequently. Those is currently from last year. People had questions about gained or increased earned income and also about some of the APR uploads. So we have those there. We have some notes here, as mentioned, regarding HMIS data cleanup. If you're having issues with data in HMIS that needs to be cleaned up, there is the link to the COC data cleanup help desk. The link to Joanne for DV comparable database issues or questions on here. And then if it is not one of those two items, we have a list of issues that you may run into regarding if it's a question related to the score, problems logging in, as mentioned earlier. If you believe there was an issue with an unwarranted penalty, questions about the grievance, everything that shows on here, you select what your issue is. If you are logged into the system, then it will know which projects you have access to and you can identify which project your question is about. If you're having a login question, obviously, or a problem logging in, obviously you will not be able to select that. Enter any of the information there. Your contact information, if you're logged in, will be pre-populated. If you're having login issues, you'll have to enter that manually. Hit the button and the message will go off either to Housing Innovations or to Nutmeg, depending on what the issue is and who's responsible for handling it. And that is about it for the contact page. Is there any questions on there yet so far?
Yeah, I just want to reinforce what Liz said earlier, right? It's critical that people use this function in the RED rather than email to submit, requests for help through this process. If you email one of the people on our team and ask for support, we're going to tell you, please go into the RED and fill out that form. And the reason for that, it's not because we're trying to be bureaucratic, I promise you. It's because we need to have a way of tracking to make sure that we are following up and resolving every issue. And it's just not possible for multiple people on the team to do that in email. So that is really why. It's to make sure that we are being responsive and getting all your questions answered and the help that you need as quickly as possible, and that we can be sure that all of the issues have been resolved. So again, don't email us, please use this function and then everything will be tracked.
Okay, thank you for that. Also, if you have multiple different issues, it's important to not try, if they're unrelated, to not combine them all into one request because some issues will be handled by Housing Innovations and some by Nutmeg. So if you combine them into one message, that's gonna get a little bit confusing and require extra back and forth. It could take longer to get back to you. So if you have a problem with the score as well as a project or a question about the grievance process or something else, submitting two different issues, separately from each other will allow them to get addressed more quickly and smoothly so that you're not left waiting. All right, so that covers the support page, which was one of the last items on my to-do list here. Any questions in the chat so far?
Not in chat. We can ask folks. I don't see any hands, but folks can unmute themselves or put something in the chat. Any questions? It's a great time to ask Adam a burning question. I'm not seeing anything.
Well,
No,
hopefully it's just simple enough that it's almost self-explanatory and doesn't require too much
I
help.
think it is. I think it's great. I'm a big fan, Adam.
All right, well, I guess if there's no other questions on it, then I think my piece of this is done at the moment.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you really for all the work that you've done on this. I think it's a huge improvement over the way we used to do things, and I hope that everyone who's new to this, it's going to be super easy. And for those folks that have been at it a while, I hope that you agree that this is a big improvement and useful. I hope for the providers to be able to see everything and have everything be super easy and transparent.
I think so. So I want to go back to Amanda's question before we wrap up and kind of ask final questions. So Amanda, thank you so much. I went back and in fact neglected to include what dates we would be accepting for DEMIS survey. So thank you for finding that. And it will just be calendar year 2022. But remember, they're due December 16th. And please remember this too. I know I said it once, but again, because you submit them to DEMIS does not mean we see them. Maybe one day in the future, there'll be the Jetsons' fantastic systems talking to one another. But right now we will take the DEMIS surveys, but you must follow our BOSS process, which as Lauren said, is pretty simple. We've got instructions in the email I've sent out in the past. And then in the next 24 hours, we will send another email with the recording, the slides, information, and then I will update that section to let folks know the dates for the DEMIS surveys. So thanks for that, Amanda, we appreciate it. And I think we're showing thanks, Shannon, final resources. So if you go to the BOSS website, we have a page all about renewal evaluation. You can find all kinds of great information on stuff we've talked about, resources and things to help you. So check that out as needed. And I think we're down to just one more page of resources. So these are all kinds of great resources on how to get to RED, how to run an APR, reading an APR, about the annual assessment guide. So these are fantastic resources, both for folks who have done this forever and need a refresher, and for folks who this may be your first time at it. So check out all the good resources. This is our contact information. So I think we've all made clear when you're supposed to be asking questions in RED, but if you have a process question, a clarification question, you're just not getting something, like I said, please reach out to us. We are happy to help you out, and we don't want folks to be frustrated. And as Lauren said, it's just Adam and the team, and everyone's done a really great job of, I think, making a super tool. But let us know if you're having problems with the process or just have questions. Reach out to us, please.
And also, if you have ideas for how to make the tool better,
Absolutely.
we are always, so we made some improvements from last year to this year, and we will continue to work with our partners at Nutmeg to, you know, to keep making improvements where they make sense. So if you have ideas about things you would like to see in the red, or, you know, how to make that tool easier for your teams to use, please don't hesitate to let us know.
Absolutely. Great. And yes, I apologize. We had some technical issues with the slides. We will send the slides out and they will be posted momentarily on the CT Boss website. Anything else? Any other questions? Well, thank you for joining a cloudy Wednesday, and stay safe. For everybody in Connect, you know, we're supposed to get some bad weather here, so everyone stay inside, and hopefully we'll all have power this afternoon. But thank you. It was really good to see everybody. Nice to connect, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Take